All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Recha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And and as you can see in the title, Daniel chapter 8. Lately, the Spirit has been on me to go into some of these breakdowns. So, I mean, I'm sure there are numerous videos out there on a lot of these chapters, but oftentimes, YouTube will take down a particular channel, and that particular channel may have these breakdowns on it. And so you may come back a month later, 2 months later, 3 years later, and the videos are not there because YouTube deleted the channel along with the contents. So it's always good to go over these into these breakdowns again and again. So we're going to go into Daniel chapter 8 today, and Lord willing to be edifying to the elect. Now, Daniel, the 8th chapter, on an overview level, deals with a couple of things. It starts off talking about really from the time period of the rising to power of the Greeks, led by Alexander, all the way down to pretty much like the ending of the Greek Empire, the latterish end of the Greek Empire, and how their interaction with Israel. Okay, so the first half really talks about on a high level, the Greeks coming into power, they take down the Achaemenid Empire or the Medo-Persian Empire, and then it focuses more on Antiochus Epiphanes, okay, from the Seleucid line of the Greeks and the things that he did, because the Lord chose Antiochus as a vessel to bring calamities and destruction upon Israel as a punishment. And that was a prophecy or a vision that Daniel received back during the time of the Babylonian Empire, right? During the reign of Belshazzar, which, he was like the unofficial king, right? The regent, the one ruling instead of his father, as his father was out. So for those latter years, Daniel got these visions, and that's somewhere around what, the 540s to or so BC, prior to the Greeks coming into power. And when you read in the book of Maccabees, it's a historical account of what actually happened. So in the book of Maccabees, there's an account of the fulfillment of some of these things that were written here in the book of Daniel, the 8th chapter. So let's get into it. This is Daniel chapter 8, verse 1. I'm not going to go super in depth, but I'll mention, if there are any secular parts or extra biblical information, I'll make mention of it so that you can look it up and you can read more about it yourself. Because if we go into every detail, we'll be here for a long time. So this is Daniel chapter 8, verse 1. It says, "In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me, Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at the first." So remember, even in Daniel, the 7th chapter, he also received a vision. And now this is the another vision that he received. "And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass, when I saw that I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in a vision, and I was by the river of Ulai." And when you look up Shushan, the modern day term, at least, that'll come up is like Susa. But it's over there in, I believe, in Persia or so. Let's see. Let's click on that. All right, so we have Shushan, Shawashan. It says here, see Shushan or Susa, Lily. It says the winter residence of the Persian kings, located on the river Ulai or Causpis. And a good habit to get into is, as you read, you may come across a name like this. You want to look it up, and you type it in maybe Google Images, right? Shushan or Susa or River of Ulai, and you can get an image of what it looks like, or geographically, where is this, right? So it's a Shushan Palace map. And if we share this tab, so you can see here, this is an image on, they call it Susa, right? But it's here in Elam. all right, or the province of Persia. And the river Ulai, I think, yeah, it should be somewhere. Maybe it's not a big enough river to be noted on this high level, but should be somewhere around there. So anyway, as it reads, which is in the province of Elam, and the Elam are the modern day Persians. And I saw in a vision, and I was by the river of Ulai. Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had two horns, and the two horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. So Daniel sees this ram. He sees the ram has two horns. They're both high, but one is higher than the other. And the ram in Daniel, the 8th chapter, is talking about the same kingdom that Daniel saw in the 7th chapter. However, in the 7th chapter, he refers to it as a bear that raised itself up on one side. And this ram here is talking about the Medo-Persian Empire, which at this point was known as the Achaemenid Empire. So when you look up the Achaemenid Empire, it'll tell you mainly founded or ruled, the main guy that comes to mind is Cyrus, right, who was a Persian. And the two horns represents the two nations, the nation of the Medes and the Persians. And as it says here, one was higher than the other. The one that was higher represented the Persians because they were stronger in might. And ultimately, when they came up into power, they had a greater dominion. And the higher came up last because the Persians, when you look into the history, you had the Median Empire. Let me pull up an image here and zoom out real quick. So if we look here at the Median Empire, okay. Okay, so here is a picture of, as you can see, Media. And at this time, you had Media, Babylonia over here, and so on and so forth. So this is the Median Empire right here. Now, for a period of time, the Medes were basically like the quote unquote top dogs, because within this empire, you had Medes and Persians, but the Medes and Persians are two different nations. The Medes are Japhetic, going back to Madai, and the Persians are Shemitic, going back to Elam. So these are two different nations that were both within this region. But for a period of time, when there was known as the Median Empire, the Medes were the ruling class. And then later on, it became when Cyrus came up into power, the Persians basically came up into power and basically dominated over the Medes, and now they became the ruling power. That's why it was known as the Achaemenid Empire. So if we type in here Median Empire, so we pull up here the Medes, right? Just pull up the Medes on a Wikipedia search. Let's come down a little bit. So it says here the Medes were an ancient Iranian people who spoke the Median language and who inhabited an area known as Media between western and northern Iran. Now, they inhabited the region, but it doesn't make them necessarily Iranians, because when people think of Iranian today, they think of Persians, which are Elamites. But with the Medes, the actual nationality of the Medes, they descend from Madai, and Madai was not a Elamite. Okay, so it says here, and who inhabited the area known as Media between western and northern Iran. Around the 11th century, they occupied the mountainous region of the northern Iran, so on and so forth. We want to come down and get some more information that's more relevant here. Okay, so it says the accounts relating to the Medes reported by Herodotus have left the image of a powerful people who have founded or who have formed an empire at the beginning of the 7th century BC that lasted until the 550s BC, played a determining role in the fall of the Assyrian Empire, and competed with the powerful kingdoms of Lydia and Babylonia. So the Median Empire were sort of contemporary rulers with the Babylonian Empire. And that's why when I pulled up the image on here, you can see Babylon or Babylonia, but you can also see Media. So when you read about the history, you'll notice that there's talk about the Persians, right? There's talk about Babylon and what they did to us, but you don't really hear too much talk about the Medes exclusively. And that's because they were ruling around the same time as the Babylonians, but they weren't necessarily going to war with each other. So around the time when Nebuchadnezzar was ruling, you also had the Medes that were also in there in power. Okay, and as it says here, they lasted until the 550s BC, which was right around the time that Cyrus, the Lord raised up Cyrus to take them over. It says here, let's come down a bit. Okay, so it says, in any case, it appears that after the fall of the last Median king against Cyrus the Great of the Persian Empire, Media became an important province that was prized by the empires which successively dominated it. And as you can see, you have the Achaemenids. So the Persians came up into power. They basically came up above the Medes. And that's why in Daniel 8, it refers to them as coming up, higher or coming up last. And that was led by Cyrus. And when you look into it, I think the last, as it says here, the last king of the Medes or the Median Empire was a man by the name of Astyages. And this man was actually the grandfather of Cyrus. Okay. Astyages' daughter had a son, and that son was Cyrus. So Astyages was a Mede, but his grandson, Cyrus, was a Persian. Okay, and they were related through that daughter. Okay, Astyages' daughter. So as you can see, Astyages, and this is the man that you read of in Daniel 5 or even in other books of Daniel, known as Darius the Mede. In the secular history, that's what his name is, Astyages. So it says Astyages was the last king of the Median Empire, reigning from 585 to 550 BC. The son of Cyaxares, he was dethroned by his grandson, Cyrus the Great. So going back to Daniel 8, not to get too much into the, the secular history, going back to Daniel 8 and 3, the reason Daniel sees the two horns being high, but they're still on the same beast, right? Because, like I said, when the Medes were in power, which were one of the horns, the Persians were under them. And when the Persians came up into power, being led by Cyrus, they basically subjected the Medes under them. Okay, but they were still part of that same empire. So as it says, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. And the higher was talking about the Persians. So verse 4, it says, I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward. And I might have to break this lesson up also into maybe two parts or so for time's sake. But it says, yeah, I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beasts might stand before him. Neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand. But he did according to his will and became great. So what Daniel saw was basically it represents the Achaemenid Empire when they came up into power, how they started conquering and dominating the rest of these empires or nations, for lack of a better word. So if we come up here and we pull up the Achaemenid Empire, let's try to get a better. Okay, so we'll try to get a better. This is not too bad. All right, we can work with this. So you can see this is the Achaemenid Empire, pretty huge, or the Persian Empire, pretty huge. You had Susa or Shushan over here. So this is where Daniel is standing, and he says he's seen this ram, and this ram is pushing westward and northward and southward. And this correlates to Daniel, the 7th chapter, when in that vision, Daniel saw the same thing, but it was represented as a bear that lifted up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth. And the 3 ribs represented the main power structures or strongholds or nations or empires at that time that the Persians took down, which was Babylon, Lydia, which was up here in Asia Minor, and Egypt, which was down south here. Okay, so westward would be directly west of Babylon, was Slakia, directly west of Susa, where Daniel was, would be Babylon, and more northward of that would be Lydia, and south of that is Egypt. Okay, and you can read about the history on, I think Cyrus led the conquering of the west, Babylon, and as well as Lydia, and then it was his son Cambyses II who actually did the conquering of Egypt. Okay, but like I said, you can look that up and get more information on that yourself. Now, when Cyrus, being the king at the time, when they made that, I guess that attack against Babylon and took them down, when you read about it, they he put this Darius the Mede in charge of this region of Babylon. Okay, and because Darius, when you read about it in the secular history, remember that was his grandfather. So after he had taken down his grandfather and taken down his empire, he basically had mercy on him. He didn't put him to death. All right. So when they took over Babylon, he gave him that region, or that jurisdiction. So you'll notice in Daniel, I believe the 9th chapter, Daniel talks about how he had a vision, or whatever account he was given, but he mentions the ruler at the time was Darius. No longer was it Belshazzar. Right. So Daniel 9:1, in the first year of Darius, right, the son of Ahasuerus, which is Darius the Mede. Okay, and this Ahasuerus is not the one in the book of Esther. So he's saying that because at this point the Babylonians have already fallen. So let's go back and continue where we left off. Verse 4, I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him, because it was their time to rule. So nobody was able to basically stand up or fight back. Neither was there anyone that could deliver out of his hand, but he did according to his will and became great. And like I showed you, that map right here, this is a pretty huge dominion. Okay. So let's keep on going. Verse 5, and as I was considering, behold, an he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. Now, the he-goat here is, we're talking about the Grecian Empire, and the notable horn between his eyes was Alexander. Okay, Alexander the Greek. And it says he came from the west on the face of the whole earth, because number one, Macedon, where Alexander came from, was far west compared to wherever it was Daniel was, right, at Shushan. And it says here, he touched not the ground, meaning when this he-goat was coming from the west, it wasn't just flying in the air, it was conquering. All right, it was conquering all the way from Macedon, coming into Asia Minor, coming into Coal Syria, coming into Egypt, eastward. It was making its way eastward as the Greeks, led by Alexander, were conquering. And they moved so swiftly, which is why it says it touched not the ground, because it moved so swiftly. I think it took about 12 years or so for Alexander to conquer all that territory, which is a very, very short amount of time to conquer that amount of territory. Because remember, you're going against different nations. These are wars. There are certain wars that take years. Some cities you may need to lay siege to them. Some might come out and go to war with you directly. You can't just go to war with one nation and then you rest for like 2 days and then go to war with another one. Your soldiers are going to be tired. They're going to be worn out. They're going to be injuries. They're going to be casualties. So all these are part of war. So in order to conquer that whole region, right now, if we pull up something like Grecian Empire, we can take a look here. To conquer all the way from here, Macedon, all the way up to the Indus River, to the border of India, that's a lot of conquering. Okay. And if you the analogy I give is like, if you look at somebody running track, right? If you look at pictures of people running track, it looks like their feet are not on the ground. Okay, it looks as though they're running on the air or something of that, because they're moving so fast that in real time you can see them running. But when you look at pictures, it looks like every frame that you see, it looks as though both their feet are off the ground at the same time, almost like they're hovering on the track. Let's see if I can get it. Usain Bolt. I want to see if I can get a quick image just to demonstrate this. Right. So look, here's one example. Right. Here's the still shot of Usain Bolt running. And as you can see, it doesn't even look like his feet are touching the ground because of how fast he's moving. But when you catch it in a still image, it looks as though his feet are not even touching the ground. Like even all these people right here, their feet are touching, but they're moving so fast that it looks that way. Okay, you can look at this guy back here, right? And in most still images of like track, you'll barely see both their feet on the ground. Majority of the time, it looks like their feet are not even on the ground at all. But it really just represents how fast the Greeks were conquering these different lands. Verse 4 says, I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him. Neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand, and he did according to his will and became great. And as I was considering, behold, an he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth, which was the Greeks, and touched not the ground, because they were conquering these lands at a very rapid rate. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes, and that was Alexander, which was the king. And he came to the ram that had two horns, and I'll probably stop it at this verse, like I said, for time's sake. But Lord willing, I'll be back to continue. It says, and he came to the ram that had two horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran onto him in the fury of his power. And this represented when Alexander and his army basically came, and through a series of wars, they took down the Achaemenid Empire. And like I said, you can look that up in the secular history. I believe the Apostle Aramlab did a lesson maybe 2 days ago, and he touched on this as well. And he goes into more detail as to the names of the different battles that they had. So I can recommend watching that as well to get some more context on that. So basically, at this point, the Greeks came up. They came against the Persians. They had a series of different wars, and in verse 7, it'll go into what the outcome of that was. But like I said, I'm going to stop here at verse 6, and Lord willing, I'll be back to continue from verse 7 on down. Okay. So with that, I'm going to end it here. Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. I know, especially in the book of Daniel, a lot of the different chapters in the book of Daniel are majority of the prophecies in there have come to pass, but there's a lot of history in there. And really, you can go at your discretion on how much of it you want to read, but you really only need what's necessary to understand what the chapter is going into. So with that, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Recha, Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.